My sister called from the cockpit. "Is David home?" she whispered urgently. I looked at my husband reading his newspaper. "Yes, he's right here," her voice cracked. "That's impossible. I'm watching him board first class to Paris with another woman right now. If you are watching this, kindly subscribe and let me know where you are watching from, and I hope that you're safe wherever you are." After hanging up with my sister Emma, I stood frozen in our Manhattan kitchen. David sat 15 feet away, coffee mug in hand, completely unaware that his world was about to implode. This felt like the beginning of every Reddit revenge story I'd ever read, except this was my life. 20 years as a forensic accountant had taught me to question everything. When numbers didn't add up, there was always a reason. When people lied about money, there was always evidence. But this, my husband couldn't be in two places at once. "Who was that, sweetheart?" David asked. Not looking up from the Financial Times, I studied his face. Same brown eyes, same slight scar above his left eyebrow from childhood. Same wedding ring we'd chosen together 5 years ago. Everything exactly as it should be. Just Emma checking her flight schedule, I managed. David nodded absently, sipping from his favorite mug, the one that read "World's Most Adequate Husband," my anniversary gift 3 years ago. He'd laughed when he opened it, claiming he never trusted people who called themselves the best at anything. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "Photo coming now. Prepare yourself." The image loaded slowly. Through an airplane window, I could see business class. There in seat 2A, sat a man in David's exact navy suit. The profile was unmistakable. The curve of his jaw, the way he gestured while talking. David, my David, talking intimately to a blonde woman who looked barely 30. I looked up at the David in our kitchen. Gray sweater, reading glasses, wedding ring catching the morning light. Real, present, impossible. "Actually," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "I think I'll make pancakes." David raised an eyebrow. "Pancakes? On a Wednesday? What's the occasion?" The occasion was that my sister was watching my husband on a plane, while my husband sat in our kitchen. One of these realities had to be false, but I couldn't say that. Not yet. Not until I understood what was happening. "Can't a wife make pancakes without needing a reason?" He smiled, that familiar half smile. "Of course, though, you know I have that client meeting at 11. I pulled ingredients from the pantry, my hands steady despite the chaos in my mind. Flour, eggs, milk. Simple things that made sense, unlike the photograph showing my husband in two places at once. As I measured flour, I thought about the small inconsistencies I'd dismissed recently. The night he'd come home smelling like unfamiliar perfume. The weekend conference in Boston, I couldn't find any record of online. The way he'd been almost too perfect lately. No forgotten anniversaries, no irritating habits that had once driven me crazy. "I love you," David said suddenly, walking over to kiss my forehead. "I love you too," I replied automatically, the words hollow as the measuring cup in my hand. But as I watched him return to his newspaper, moving with precise familiarity through our morning routine, a terrifying thought crystallized. Memory could be manufactured, reality could be edited, and somewhere between my kitchen and that airplane, my marriage had split into two versions. One of them was a lie. The question was which one was sitting at my breakfast table. Within an hour of David leaving for his supposed client meeting, I was deep in our financial records. If this was some elaborate Reddit cheating story, there would be evidence. There always was. I logged into our joint accounts with the same methodical precision I used tracking corporate embezzlement. The credit card statements loaded slowly, each month revealing a pattern that made my chest tighten. Tokyo Mandarin Oriental, March 15th, Initeen. I remembered that weekend clearly. David had supposedly visited his mother in Connecticut to help her move furniture. I'd offered to come, but he'd insisted I stay home and rest after a brutal audit. The hotel charge was for 2 guests, room service for 2, spa treatments for 2. My hands trembled as I scrolled further. 4 Seasons Barcelona. Another weekend when he'd claimed to have client dinners downtown. I'd been home with food poisoning, too sick to question why his meetings required overnight stays at luxury hotels. This wasn't a simple affair. This was systematic deception, with significant financial resources behind it. Every forensic instinct I'd developed told me this fidelity story ran much deeper than infidelity. I called my college roommate Sarah Chen. After her divorce from a Wall Street trader, who'd been living 3 separate lives. She'd become what she called a private intelligence specialist. "I need your help," I said when she answered. "And Sarah, this is going to sound insane. Try me." I explained everything: the phone call, the photograph, the financial irregularities. Sarah listened without interruption, her prosecutorial mind processing each detail. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said. "And Lisa, prepare yourself. If this is what I think it is, we're dealing with something unprecedented." While waiting, I continued my investigation. Our joint investment accounts showed regular activity, but when I dug deeper, I found withdrawals I didn't recognize. Small amounts at first: 5,000 here, 10,000 there, always just below the threshold that would trigger automatic alerts. The kind of systematic siphoning I'd seen in countless fraud cases. Except this time, it was happening in my own accounts. Sarah arrived looking grim, tablet clutched against her chest. She'd worn that same expression when she'd discovered her own husband's deception. "Show me everything," I said. She opened her tablet, fingers flying across the screen with practiced efficiency. "The woman your sister saw is Madison Vale, 26, pharmaceutical sales rep. But Lisa, that's just her cover identity." Photos appeared on screen. Madison and a man who looked exactly like David at restaurants I didn't recognize. Madison and David look alike at Miami hotels. Madison and this impossible version of my husband at charity galas, events I'd supposedly attended alone. "How long?" My voice sounded distant. "Based on digital footprints, at least 8 months. But here's where it gets interesting." Sarah pulled up another screen. "I accessed your building's security footage. The video showed our lobby from last Tuesday. There was David entering at 6:30 p.m., briefcase in hand. Everything looked normal, until Sarah zoomed in. "Watch his reflection in the marble floor," she said. The reflection flickered slightly. When he passed under the chandelier, the shadow fell at the wrong angle. Details invisible to casual observation, but glaring to someone trained in deception detection. "This is deepfake technology," Sarah explained. "Someone's been inserting fabricated footage into your building's security system. We're talking about software that costs hundreds of thousands to implement properly." I stared at the screen, my mind struggling to process the implications. Why would someone go to these lengths? That's what we need to figure out. "But Lisa, I spoke to your neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. She mentioned seeing David leave with suitcases 3 months ago, the weekend you were at that mandatory conference." I remembered that weekend, 2 days of mind-numbing SEC presentations. I'd come home Sunday evening to find David cooking dinner, rosemary chicken, my favorite. "But I came home and he was here," I said. "Was he? Or was someone who looked exactly like him?" The room tilted slightly. This was starting to sound like the most elaborate Reddit revenge story ever conceived, except I was living it. Could people really be replaced without anyone noticing? "Has David been working on anything sensitive?" Sarah asked. "Any deals that might make him a target?" I thought about his recent work: mergers, acquisitions, the usual investment banking activities. Nothing that seemed worth this level of deception. Unless there was something he hadn't told me about. Another secret to add to the growing pile. "I need to see more footage," I said, my voice steadier now. "Every entry and exit for the past 3 months." Sarah nodded, already typing. "I'll get what I can. But Lisa, you need to be careful. Whoever's doing this has invested serious resources. This isn't simple adultery, this is something else entirely." After Sarah left, I spent the afternoon in suspended animation, cleaning things that didn't need cleaning, organizing files that were already organized. Anything to keep my hands busy, while my mind raced through possibilities that seemed increasingly insane. At 5:30, I heard David's key in the lock. The man who might not be David, the stranger who'd been living in my home, sharing my bed, playing the role of my husband with such precision, I'd never questioned it, until today. But now I had a plan, and by tomorrow morning, I'd know exactly who was sleeping beside me. I had prepared David's favorite dinner: shrimp scampi with white wine sauce. There was just one problem. The real David was deathly allergic to shellfish. 3 emergency room visits over the years had made that crystal clear. His medical alert bracelet, worn religiously, specifically listed shellfish as life-threatening. "Your favorite," I said, setting the plate in front of him. He looked at the dish with genuine delight. "You haven't made this in months." That was true. I hadn't made it because my husband would die if he ate it. But this man picked up his fork without hesitation, twirling the linguine with practiced ease, bringing a shrimp to his mouth with obvious appreciation. No reaction, no swelling, no reaching for an EpiPen, just a man enjoying dinner. "This is incredible," he said, taking another bite. "Your grandmother's recipe never fails." My grandmother had been dead for 20 years, but she would have been horrified to see me serving shellfish to test someone like a laboratory specimen. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to discover the person sleeping next to you might be a complete stranger? I was about to find out. "I was thinking," I said, refilling his wine glass, "we should visit your mother this weekend." The real David would have immediately manufactured an excuse. His relationship with his mother was toxic at best. She'd never approved of me, never forgiven him for marrying outside their social circle. Our visits required weeks of negotiation. "That sounds wonderful," he replied, without missing a beat. "She'll be thrilled to see us." Thrilled. His mother had never been thrilled about anything involving me. "We could stay the whole weekend," I continued. "Help with that garden project she mentioned." "Perfect. I'll call her after dinner." The real David would rather have dental surgery without anesthesia than spend a weekend doing manual labor for his mother. This man was failing every test, yet succeeding perfectly at being a better version of my husband. After dinner we settled into our usual evening routine. Netflix, mild conversation, the comfortable silence of a long marriage. Except nothing felt comfortable anymore. In our bedroom I changed while he brushed his teeth. The sounds from the bathroom were perfect: electric toothbrush for exactly 2 minutes, mouthwash gargle, face washing routine. Someone had studied my husband's habits with anthropological precision. When he climbed into bed, I forced myself to remain still. He fell asleep within minutes, breathing evening out peacefully. The real David was a chronic insomniac who read until past midnight. I waited, counting his breaths, until I was certain he was deeply asleep. Then I slipped out of bed and found his briefcase. Inside, beneath investment portfolios, I found an envelope that changed everything. A pay stub made out to Marcus Webb, address in Queens, an actors' union card. But most damning were pages of handwritten notes documenting my life in excruciating detail. "Lisa likes coffee with 1 sugar, no cream, calls her sister Tuesdays and Thursdays. Anniversary October 12th. Expects flowers but pretends she doesn't. Father died 2 years ago. Sensitive subject. Tears up during Casablanca, every time." Our entire marriage reduced to bullet points. A character study for someone preparing to audition for the role of devoted husband. At the bottom, a note in different handwriting. 3 months maximum, maintain cover until transfer complete. This performance had an expiration date. I photographed every page, then crept back to bed where the stranger wearing my husband's face continued sleeping peacefully. The next morning, I watched Marcus perform his routine with newfound clarity. Every gesture studied, every word carefully chosen. When he mentioned the gym, I manufactured an urgent client crisis requiring immediate office attention. My office building stood empty on Sunday morning. I locked myself in my corner office and opened forensic accounting software with surgical precision. The past 3 months revealed systematic theft, so subtle I would have missed it without looking specifically. Transfers of $9,999, just below federal reporting thresholds. Moving to accounts in the Caymans, notorious for privacy laws and resistance to international investigation. Each transfer authorized with my husband's credentials during times when Marcus had been sitting across from me at dinner or sleeping beside me in bed. The real David was somewhere else, systematically bleeding our accounts while his hired double kept me distracted. I traced the money through 3 shell companies: Lux Corp International in the Caymans, Meridian Holdings in Panama, Apex Investments in Cyprus. Corporate structures designed to launder money and hide assets from people exactly like me. 15 years of careful financial planning, vanishing into numbered Swiss accounts I could see but couldn't touch. But money was just the beginning. When I accessed my professional client database, I found something worse. Login records showing access from IP addresses I didn't recognize. Downloads of sensitive financial data from 3 major corporate audits I'd conducted. Information that could facilitate insider trading worth tens of millions. They weren't just stealing from me. They were using my reputation, my access, my client relationships to commit federal crimes. When discovered, I wouldn't just lose money. I'd lose my license, my career, potentially my freedom. This was bigger than any Reddit cheating story or fidelity story I'd ever heard. This was organized crime using sophisticated technology and psychological manipulation. I needed help, beyond what Sarah could provide. Grace Morrison answered on the third ring. Former prosecutor turned private attorney, she'd handled my father's estate after his sudden death. Her own divorce from a judge, taking bribes, had sharpened her understanding of how the system failed women discovering their husbands were criminals. Grace, I need your help with something unprecedented. 20 minutes, she said, after I explained the situation. Grace arrived looking like she'd thrown on the first clothes available. I showed her everything: financial transfers, stolen client data, photographs of Marcus's briefcase contents. She studied the evidence with focused intensity that had once made defense attorneys nervous. This is sophisticated, she finally said. Professional-level identity theft combined with financial fraud and corporate espionage. But here's your problem. Everything's technically authorized. Your husband's credentials were used. Without proving he wasn't actually present for these transactions, you're looking at a he said she said situation. But I have proof. Marcus Webb has been impersonating him. An actor who could claim he was hired for legitimate reasons. Maybe David wanted to surprise you. Maybe it was research. Without David here to contradict that story, authorities won't act fast enough. My phone buzzed. The encrypted phone Sarah had given me, hidden in my desk drawer. A message from an unknown number. Check David's old phone. Grace leaned over as I opened it. Someone wants you to find something. This feels like breadcrumbs. We drove back to my apartment. Marcus was still at the gym, his Sunday routine predictable as clockwork. In David's office, I found his previous iPhone in the drawer, where he kept old electronics he claimed to be recycling. Screen cracked from when he dropped it 6 months ago. I pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life. 5% battery, but alive. The phone had been receiving messages for months while supposedly broken. There was a conversation with Madison Vale going back 8 months. Plans, photos, details that made my blood run cold. The wife suspects nothing. David had written 3 months ago. Marcus is perfect. By the time she figures it out, we'll be untouchable. The most recent message was from yesterday. Tomorrow we finalize everything. Paris, then disappear forever. Grace stared at the screen, her prosecutor's mind building the case. If they're planning to finalize tomorrow, we need to act tonight. I felt something shift inside me, fear and confusion crystallizing into cold determination. The same focus that helped me unravel million-dollar fraud schemes would now protect what remained of my life. But first I had one more test for Marcus. One that would force him to break character completely. I handed Grace the phone and moved to my laptop with newfound purpose. "What are you doing?" Grace asked. "Setting a trap." My fingers flew across the keyboard, creating something beautiful in its simplicity. Financial malware disguised as routine investment documents that would appear in our shared cloud storage. The code was elegant, designed to activate when anyone accessed our joint accounts from an international IP address. When triggered, it would freeze every transaction, lock down associated accounts, and simultaneously alert federal investigators to suspicious activity. "Is that legal?" Grace watched over my shoulder. "It's my own account. I'm protecting my assets from theft." I embedded the virus in files labeled Q3 Investment Review and Tax Documents 2024. David's arrogance would be his downfall. He always checked our investments before major decisions, a habit from his banking days that even crime hadn't broken. The apartment door opened. Marcus was back from the gym, whistling something tuneless. Grace slipped David's phone into her purse while I closed my laptop. "Working on Sunday again." Marcus appeared in the doorway, performance perfect. Sweat on his forehead, gym bag over his shoulder. "Just finishing up," I said. Grace stopped by to discuss a case. He nodded with practiced charm. "Good to see you, Grace. Will you stay for lunch?" I had one final test, something that would shatter his performance completely. "Actually," I said, standing up, "I was thinking we could visit that place in Brooklyn. You know, where we went after our honeymoon. They had that amazing grilled octopus." Marcus's smile never wavered, but I saw the flicker of panic in his eyes. We'd never been to Brooklyn together. David and I had honeymooned in Santorini, not Greece as I'd deliberately implied. But Marcus didn't know that. "Brooklyn," he repeated, buying time. "The little taverna, where we danced until dawn. Another fabrication to cover his ignorance. The place I'd described didn't exist. You said it was the most romantic night of your life, I continued, pushing harder. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, though I thought it was closed for renovations. Grace watched our exchange like a tennis match, recognizing the psychological test I was administering. You're probably right, I said, smiling warmly while documenting another crack in his performance. Let's just order Italian instead. The relief in his shoulders was visible. After Grace left with the evidence, I made 3 strategic phone calls that would light fires under David's carefully constructed scheme. First, Robert Steinberg, CEO of Steinberg Industries, and David's biggest client. I kept my tone conversational but concerned. Robert, I noticed some unusual activity in investment portfolios while reviewing adjacent accounts. Probably just a clerical error, but you might want your team to take a look. The seed of doubt planted. By Monday morning, an internal audit would discover discrepancies leading back to David's unauthorized access. Second call, Jennifer Wu at Phoenix Capital. Same approach, different angle. A mysterious transfer that didn't match their usual patterns. Third, David Martinez at Meridian Financial. By tomorrow, 3 major firms would be discovering security breaches that all traced back to credentials associated with David Mercer. My phone rang as I ended the third call. The caller ID showed my mother's assisted living facility. Mrs. Chen. Nancy, the facility director, said, "Your mother is fine, but she's quite agitated. She insists someone is lying about your husband visiting her." I drove to New Jersey, telling Marcus I was handling a medication crisis. The facility sat nestled among autumn trees, a peaceful setting for lives in their final chapters. Ava, my mother, grabbed my hands the moment I walked in, her grip stronger than her 81 years should allow. "That woman is lying. I told her David was here last month, but she says there's no record." My mother's dementia made her unreliable in most situations, but she had moments of startling clarity about recent events. "Tell me about his visit, Mom." "He came on a Thursday, pudding day. Asked about your father's life insurance. Wanted to know if there were other policies besides the one you knew about." My blood turned to ice. There had been another policy, Northwestern Mutual, $500,000 that went toward Mom's care. Few people knew about it. Did he ask about anything else? The safety deposit box. Wanted to know which bank, what was in it. I told him about your father's coin collection. I kissed her forehead and stepped into the hallway with Nancy. "Check your security footage from last month." Every Thursday, Nancy pulled up files on her tablet. We scrolled through weeks of footage until there he was. August 15th, 2:47 p.m. David walking through the front door, signing the visitor log, spending 43 minutes with my mother. But when Nancy pulled up the physical sign-in sheet photographed and archived, David's name wasn't there. The page showed a gap as if that line had been skipped entirely. "He signed it," Nancy said, bewildered. I watched him sign it. Someone had digitally altered the archived image, removing his signature with surgical precision. But they hadn't thought to check the security footage. David had been planning this for months, gathering information about every asset, every policy, every possible source of money. He'd even targeted my mother, mining her confused memories for financial details. The calculated cruelty of it made me physically sick, but it also gave me everything I needed. I drove back with security footage saved on my phone. Another piece of evidence in the growing mountain of David's deception. Sunday evening traffic moved slowly, giving me time to process the scope of his betrayal. This wasn't just adultery or financial theft. This was psychological warfare designed to destroy every foundation of my life, while keeping me compliant. My phone buzzed with a message from Emma. Her flight had landed at Charles de Gaulle 3 hours ago. The attached photos made my hands tighten on the steering wheel. David and Madison at the airport currency exchange, his hand on her back with casual intimacy. Another photo showed them at hotel reception, the Lancaster on Champs-Élysées, where rooms started at €800 per night. Madison wore a diamond bracelet I recognized, the one David had supposedly bought for his mother's birthday 6 months ago. Their body language spoke of practiced comfort, the way she adjusted his collar, the way he guided her through the lobby with proprietary confidence. This wasn't a recent affair. This was a relationship that might have predated our entire marriage. I pulled into our building's garage to find Marcus pacing near the elevator, phone pressed to his ear. When he saw me, his face rearranged itself into concern, but not fast enough to hide the anxiety underneath. "There you are," he said, ending his call abruptly. "I was getting worried. How's your mother?" "She's fine, just confused about some old documents." I watched him process this, saw the slight relaxation when I didn't elaborate. Back in our apartment, I made a decision that would either expose everything or destroy my chance at justice. Tomorrow morning, I would force this elaborate performance to its breaking point. But tonight, I had to sleep next to a stranger one last time, knowing that by dawn federal agents would be at my door. Sitting across from Marcus at our dining table, I pulled out my phone with deliberate casualness. "I've been thinking," I said, scrolling through my calendar. "Our anniversary is coming up next month. 5 years since we met at that gallery opening." Marcus nodded, his actor's training keeping his expression neutral despite the fact that David and I had met at a mutual friend's dinner party 6 years ago. "Not at any gallery." Another test failed. "I want to do something special. A surprise party tomorrow morning before the markets open. Invite all your colleagues from the firm, your biggest clients, show them the apartment." His eyes flickered with confusion. "Tuesday morning. That's unusual timing. You always said the best deals happen before breakfast. Besides, it would be memorable." "Different." I pulled up my contacts, letting enthusiasm color my voice. "I'll handle everything. You just need to send the invites tonight. Make it sound exclusive, urgent." Marcus hesitated, clearly trying to figure out if this was part of his script or something unexpected. But refusing would break character, and maintaining his cover was paramount. "If that's what you want," he said finally. "Perfect. Send them now while I make dinner." I watched him compose messages on his phone, fingers moving reluctantly across the screen. Investment banking colleagues, major clients, people whose presence would be impossible to explain when federal agents arrived. Within minutes, responses started coming in, confusion mixed with agreement. "When David Mercer requested your presence, you showed up. While preparing what would be our last dinner together." I felt unexpected sympathy for Marcus Webb. He was probably a failed actor from Queens, who'd thought he was getting his break, playing a role for what he assumed was reality television, or an elaborate prank. Instead, he'd become accessory to federal crimes. I made salmon with asparagus, simple and quick. Marcus sat at the kitchen island, maintaining domestic normalcy, while both of us knew something had shifted. The script he'd memorized no longer matched the scene being played. "Wine?" I offered, holding up the Malbec we usually shared Sunday nights. He shook his head quickly. "I'm not feeling well. Think I might be coming down with something." First time in 3 months he'd refused alcohol. His instincts were screaming warnings even if his conscious mind hadn't processed the danger. "Marcus," I said quietly. His whole body went rigid. I'd never called David by the wrong name. "I know who you are." The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. His face cycled through emotions: surprise, fear, calculation, finally resignation. When he spoke, the British accent was gone, replaced by pure Brooklyn. "How long have you known?" "Since Tuesday morning, when my sister saw the real David boarding a plane while you sat in our living room." He put his head in his hands. "I didn't know about the crimes. He said you were separated, that he needed someone to house sit, keep up appearances for business reasons. Paid me $20,000 cash to pretend to be him for 3 months. Did you really believe that?" "I wanted to." His voice cracked. "I've been auditioning for 15 years, waiting tables, driving delivery trucks, watching younger actors get parts I wanted. Then this guy shows up, offers me more money than I've ever seen to play a role." My phone buzzed with a text from Grace. "FBI moving tomorrow morning. Everything's in place." I looked at Marcus, the stranger who'd slept in my bed, eaten at my table, participated in a deception that destroyed my life. But seeing the defeat in his shoulders, I recognized another victim of David's manipulation. "Tomorrow morning, federal agents are going to arrive. The people you invited will witness it. You can either be arrested as co-conspirator or cooperate as witness." "Witness," he said immediately. "I have documents, recordings. He made me keep everything in case you got suspicious." Marcus spent the night on our couch, after showing me a storage unit key where he'd kept contracts, recordings of phone calls with David, detailed instructions for maintaining the deception. Neither of us slept much, both waiting for dawn that would end this elaborate performance. At 5:47 a.m., my phone rang. "They got them," Emma said, her voice carrying exhaustion and satisfaction equally. "French police arrested them at Charles de Gaulle trying to board a connecting flight to Switzerland." I put her on speaker so Marcus could hear. "The arrest was dramatic," Emma continued. "Premium lounge when police arrived. Madison started crying, claiming she didn't know about any crimes. But David tried to run. They tackled him right there. Someone filmed it. It's already on European news channels." Marcus closed his eyes, perhaps realizing how close he'd come to being in those handcuffs himself. By 7:30 a.m., the first guests began arriving. Robert Steinberg from Steinberg Industries, looking confused but curious. Jennifer Wu from Phoenix Capital, impeccably dressed, despite the unusual hour. They clustered in our living room, accepting coffee and making awkward small talk about the mysterious urgency. "This better be worth it, David," Robert said to Marcus, who stood frozen by the window. I canceled a breakfast meeting. Marcus looked at me with panic in his eyes. The script hadn't prepared him for this finale. At 7:58 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway, multiple sets, moving with purpose. The doorbell rang once, followed immediately by firm knocking. "Federal agents, we have a warrant." The room erupted in confused murmurs as I opened the door. 6 FBI agents entered, their presence transforming our apartment from social gathering to crime scene. Agent Sarah Brennan, steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, held up credentials. "FBI Financial Crimes Division. We're looking for David Mercer." "That's me," Marcus said, Brooklyn accent bleeding through British veneer. "Except it's not. I want to cooperate. I was hired to impersonate him." The assembled executives watched in stunned silence as agents cuffed Marcus while reading his rights. "The storage unit in Queens," Marcus said quickly. "Unit 447, everything's there." My laptop chimed. The financial virus had activated. On screen, I watched accounts across Cayman, Switzerland, and Cyprus freeze simultaneously. 47 million in stolen funds, locked in digital amber. "Mrs. Mercer." Agent Brennan approached while her team secured Marcus. "We'll need you for formal statement. These people deserve to know why they're here first." I played Emma's recording from Tuesday morning, her voice filling the room. "I need to ask you something strange. Is your husband home right now?" The executives listened with growing comprehension. They weren't here for anniversary party. They were witnesses to massive fraud that could have destroyed their companies. Agent Brennan's phone buzzed. She answered, listened, then looked at me. "French authorities confirmed they have David Mercer and Madison Vale in custody. They'll be extradited to face charges here." The apartment that had been our sanctuary was now evidence in federal case. Agents photographed everything, treated our life as exhibits. As the last agent prepared to leave, Agent Brennan handed me a card. "We'll need you to testify. Your forensic work, the virus tracking the money, it's foundation of our case." "I'll be there," I said, meaning it. 6 months later, I stood in empty apartment overlooking Manhattan, keys heavy in my hand. The divorce had moved with unusual speed once prosecutors presented their case. The judge had been particularly unsympathetic to husband, who hired actor to replace himself while liquidating marital assets. The settlement left me with more than expected. Apartment sale proceeds, recovered funds from frozen accounts, damages that David's insurance paid rather than face public trial. My phone showed client appointment reminder. The office I'd leased in Flatiron District bore simple nameplate: Chen Forensic Consulting, specialist in marital asset protection. What started as word-of-mouth referrals had grown into waiting list of women who suspected their realities had been edited. Just last week, I'd helped surgeon discover her husband had been using deepfake technology to appear at conferences while running separate practice in Miami. Each case felt like excavating layers of deception with tools that had saved my own life. At Giovanni's restaurant, Emma waited at our usual corner booth, bottle of Chianti already open. "You did it," she said, pouring wine. "The apartment's really gone. Handed over keys an hour ago. Feels strange. 5 years erased in an afternoon." "Not erased, transformed." Emma raised her glass. "To the woman who figured out her husband was in 2 places at once and brought down international fraud ring." To the pilot who made the phone call that saved my life. We drank ritual more important than wine. What's next? Emma asked. Rebecca Harrison tomorrow. Tech startup CEO. Thinks her husband might be using AI to fake business trips. I meant for you, not work. I considered the question. 6 months ago, I'd thought my future was mapped in comfortable predictability. Now at 37, I was single, successful in field I'd invented, completely uncertain about everything except my next client. I don't know, I admitted, and that's oddly liberating. 3 years have passed since that Tuesday morning call changed everything. My consulting firm now operates from a full floor in Midtown, with 12 investigators specializing in what media calls identity fraud in intimate relationships. We've handled over 200 cases, husbands replaced by actors, wives using body doubles for alibis, entire families living fabricated lives funded by sophisticated financial crimes. What started as my personal nightmare has become an epidemic we're uniquely equipped to combat. The Reddit revenge stories and Reddit cheating stories that flood social media pale in comparison to the reality we uncover daily. Real fidelity stories involve million-dollar schemes, international conspiracies, and technology that makes simple adultery seem quaint. David received 15 years in federal prison. Madison got 8. Marcus, who cooperated fully, served 2 years and now teaches acting classes, warning students about roles too dangerous to accept. Today marks exactly 3 years since Emma's call. I'm preparing for my largest case yet. A pharmaceutical executive, whose husband appears to be running parallel lives in 3 different cities, possibly connected to corporate espionage involving FDA approvals. The irony isn't lost on me. David's betrayal destroyed the life I thought I wanted, but created the life I actually needed. Every morning, I wake up knowing exactly who I am, where I am, and why I'm here. My phone rings. Unknown number, which usually means new client. Chen Consulting. I answer. My sister works airport security. A woman's voice says, trembling with familiar panic. She just called. My husband's boarding a flight to Tokyo, but he's supposed to be in surgery right now. He's a doctor. I'm looking at him in scrubs, but she's watching him get on a plane. I reach for my notepad, that old familiar focus sharpening. Another woman discovering her reality has been edited. Another chance to turn someone's worst nightmare into their greatest strength. Tell me everything, I say, settling into my chair. Start from the beginning, because every impossible story starts somewhere, and now I'm the one who helps women find the truth hidden inside the lies. If this story of calculated deception and ultimate justice kept you watching until the very end, smash that like button right now. What moment shocked you most? When she served him the shellfish he should have been allergic to, or when the FBI arrested the imposter in front of his business partners? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more incredible stories of betrayal, investigation, and triumph. These stories prove that truth always finds a way to surface, no matter how elaborate the deception.